Hi everyone and welcome to Lights Camera Baby. Today we're diving into a fantastic topic, how genetic testing can help families on their journey to parenthood. It might sound a little technical, but don't worry, we're here to make it simple and easy to understand, I promise. We're thrilled to have two incredible guests with us today from FutureGen Labs, South Africa's leading reproductive genetic testing lab. First, I'm pleased to introduce Adele Kazilsky. She's the CEO of FutureGen Labs. Now, Adele started her career in biochemistry and genetics, but spent years running her own accounting business before returning to her true passion for science. She's the visionary behind FutureGen Labs, which is dedicated to making genetic testing more accessible for families across South Africa. And joining her is Quinton Goodyear, the lab's medical director. Now, Quinton has a master's in human molecular biology and over a decade of experience in genetic research and testing. And at FutureGen Labs, he oversees all the lab's testing and ensures every report meets the highest quality standards. Together, Adele and Quinton are helping us and helping families understand the role genetics can play in their fertility journey and empowering parents with the information they need. So let's dive into it. A very warm welcome to both of you, Adele and Quinton. It's such a pleasure to have you here today. I have a million questions because this wasn't around when I had my babies, and there's just so many questions that I have to ask. So, Adele, let's start with you. I mean, how did FutureGen Labs start? Where does the story begin, and how are you helping families?
Okay, so this story began in 2020. It actually happened 30 years ago. I think I'm giving away my age by saying that. But I did a degree in biochemistry and genetics. I was fascinated with genetics particularly. And life got the better of me. I had to get married, put bread on the table. Thank God I'm a mother of 5 kids. And I landed up going into the financial area and just leaving my biochemistry and genetics, on the side. A little upset with the good one above. Why did he put me through 4 years of university and I could do nothing about it or use it in any way whatsoever? And at the end of 2019, my son-in-law, who is a director of Kingfisher Medical, called me up and said to me, "Do you know anybody who wants to run a laboratory?" I said, "What type of laboratory?" "A genetics laboratory." I didn't miss a beat. I said, "Me." And he said, "Why?" I said, "Because that was my passion. That was my first love. That's what I was interested in."
Right.
And really how it came how it came about was that another director in Kingfisher Medical was going through a fertility journey. It took 5 years for them to have a beautiful set of twins, which are very healthy. I saw them the other day, very cute, 4 years old now. Oh. And part of IVF today, part of going through the reproductive journey is having genetic testing. It just helps in giving doctors insight and helps and assists people to having a successful pregnancy, more of a successful pregnancy as opposed to 30 years ago where it was more of a game of roulette. Mm-hmm. And they were he was so inspired to go and try to change the landscape of South Africa. They bought machinery that would test embryos before they were reimplanted back into the woman. But they're businessmen, they get a good idea, buy the machinery, and there it was sitting in an office. And he asked me, would I like to develop the laboratory? So I took that upon myself. I went overseas, visited some overseas places where they are running successful reproductive laboratories.
Right.
Came back with gusto, had lots of ideas, lots of things to do, and COVID hit about 3 weeks.
Of course, yes.
We were shut down fortuitously because we were associated with Kingfisher Medical. We had the license to move around a little bit because we were medical, so
yes,
I don't know.
Yes,
we worked under the radar. I managed to find Quinton. I went searching for a medical director. At the end of the day, I'm the business brains. I'm not the medical director here. Quinton agreed to come on board. And by August, we had set everything up in the middle of COVID. Everybody was just running around for COVID tests. We were building a reproductive genetics laboratory. And on the 4th of August, 2020, we started FutureGen Laboratories, the two of us.
That's amazing. So through that really difficult time with COVID and not being able to move much, you started a laboratory. I mean, behind the scenes. And we're not tempted to do COVID testing through the process.
Well, when they had the machines, the machines can do COVID testing, and we were pushed a lot to go get on the bandwagon. And one of my business things is keep the main thing the main thing. Become specialized in something that you know and that you do the best. Like, don't lose sight of that, because when you start making it like a marketplace with, a one-stop shop for everything, you don't do anything perfectly. Yeah. So, we had a lot of pushback as to what make the lab a COVID lab. Look, everybody needs like COVID testing. And we said, no, let everybody else worry about COVID testing. We're going to set up as a reproductive lab. And in hindsight, that was an incredibly good idea, because, we managed then to work the market. And today we proudly service over 80% of the IVF labs in South Africa.
That's amazing. That's a big number.
It is.
That is a big number. So now, Quinton, over to you. So can you tell us how do you work with these IVF clinics and doctors, and how do you make genetic testing easier for parents and these laboratories? Of course, because if you're working with 80% of them, I'm sure there's reason for that.
Right. Thanks, Progeny, and hello to all your listeners and followers. I mean, as you are a mother yourself, I think you understand the phrase, it takes a village. Yes. And I think when you talk reproductive, it's very important to keep that in mind, because no unit functions on its own. And I think what's made us so successful is, apart from our personal touch and professional knowledge, is we understand the concept that it's a team effort, When it comes to reproductive issues, your IVF center would be still your main center to help you out, right? Whether you need specialized treatments for complex things like endometriosis or fibroids, or I'm sure many things that many of your listeners have struggled with, they will still be your primary port of call. But what made us so successful is that, firstly, we brought them an additional set of tools that they can use to improve the odds of having a successful pregnancy.
So then, what is the difference between what was on offer and what are you offering to these IVF clinics? Like, so why do 80% of them want to work with you? Because, I mean, you're working via the clinics that reach the parents, am I right?
Correct.
So parents are not with you directly?
Yes. So the IVF clinics, in most cases, would be the interface between us and the patient.
Right.
Because they deal with the primary care. They've got the proper patient history. They've got all that information on hand.
Okay.
Where we play a role which is unique is, firstly, like what Adele said, we are South African based. So a lot of these services were only available overseas and at high costs. And these are very sensitive samples. These are not the quite of thing where you say, we'll just give another saliva sample, or, we'll quickly spit in a cup and, send it off again. These are people's embryos. These are people's precious samples. So to have this stuck in customs overseas, or to deal with time lag of 6-7 hours, and you're not sure what has arrived, what hasn't arrived, it just created so much anxiety. And I think the fact that we're local and we have the expertise and the facilities to do this locally means a lot to reduce the anxiety for patients, as well as for the doctors. They've got a closer connection than dealing with a random person overseas. They can pick up the phone and they can just give me a call.
And I'm assuming that the time lag is shortened as well. You're getting a speedier response, and the communication is better.
Absolutely. And again, like I said, that reduces the anxiety.
Yeah.
Because if you're dealing with a lab in America, you're 8 o'clock in the morning. Is there 2 o'clock in the morning? Is there midnight? So yes. By the time your business day is done, then you might be getting some answers back. Whereas here, for most of the clinics in Joburg, we're just down the road. So it just, like I said, again, reduces that anxiety quite severely.
Yeah. And I'm assuming in many instances like this, parents, when things happen and when they're planning their families, and they want to know now. They want answers, yes. Right?
Maybe try they want to know yesterday.
Yeah.
Like, they give it to us now and they want to know yesterday. Like it is that. There's affordability also. We need to talk about that, because the reason why the directors at Kingfisher Medical saw a hole in the market was that it was unaffordable, right? You're talking about overseas pricing. You're talking, never mind about the time, which is so vitally important. It's also the affordability.
Yeah.
And we were kind of like market disruptors. We came with the concept that the more you test, the cheaper it is, which was something completely new in the marketplace because testing one embryo was expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we all know when it comes to the IVF clinics, they're obviously trying to maximize the yield on embryos to get that baby. And it's very nerve-wracking to go and say, well, I can't afford, I've got 10 embryos and I only can afford to test 2. And am I going to take a chance on the other 8? So we actually disrupted the marketplace, gave the more you test, the cheaper it is. And that was also part of reducing the anxiety.
Yes.
And if I can just interject there, the big thing that also plays a role in is time. To make a baby, you need sperm from a man and the egg from a woman. And, men have the factory built in-house. They make sperm every day.
Right.
But the problem with infertility comes in that a woman is born with her eggs from day one.
Yes.
They do not replenish. They do not get more. They stay that number. And in fact, they actually gradually reduce every year.
Older, right.
So when it comes to your 36-year-olds, that egg is not as fresh as it was 20 years ago. And the big thing with the previous testing strategies is you're fighting against the clock. So
already
you've got 4 embryos to test. And you, for financial constraints, only test 2. What if both of those have unfavorable results?
Right.
Now you have to go and start and let's test the other 2. Maybe one works, maybe one doesn't. It goes for implantation. 3 months down the line, miscarriage. Now you start the cycle again. And the whole time you're fighting against the clock. So the more information you can have on hand in a shorter period of time, it will reduce the time to achieve pregnancy and improve your odds.
Of course.
Because again, the clock is the enemy.
Yeah.
There's a reason why people that are 36 years and older, they have a higher chance of getting Down syndrome, etc.
Right.
And that's really where we can be assistants to the clinics.
Sure. Now, that is so interesting because as we know, I've seen it over being in this business for the past 20 years and speaking to moms for the past 20 years that our moms are getting older because our women are choosing to leave their reproduction to older years because they are taking a longer time to settle. Our grandparents, great-grandparents, it was late teens, early 20s. After that, it was you're too old. But now the norm is your 30s, if not 40s, are also very, very popular. So a service like this, just again, I think is so essential in reducing that anxiety already that that you're starting a bit late, but knowing that you have a service like this can make it so much more easier and less anxious and more pleasant. All of those things, right? Already you anxious about it from the get-go.
In this economic environment, it just provides you with options, right?
Well,
you can't be a single income household anymore and have a family of 3 kids by the age of 22, And I think that's one of the big drivers.
That's true.
Why, the average age of first-time mothers, and you can quote me if I'm wrong, but I think it's moved in the last 20 years, exactly like you said, where it's early 20s, where now you're looking to close to 30s for first-time mothers.
Sure.
And that's a stat we have to deal with, And it's about providing these people also with options,
Yes.
And that's exactly what tools like we have, like PGTA, it just provides them with options so they can have the best possible outcome, to have the best possible
Absolutely. Yeah.
child.
Yeah. Start the family. That's what everybody wants. So let's go into more detail about those different types of tests that you offer, right? So genetic testing made simple for our audience. It's these are big terms, these are big words that we all come across and we're trying to figure out how do we simplify it. So what should our parents know? So let's start by you can start anywhere in terms of some of the tests that your lab offers.
So I'm going to leave it to Quinton because
Okay.
he'll give all the
Yes.
correct medical definitions. I just want to say that genetics is, the sun is just rising up on genetics. It's something that's just come on the horizon now.
Adele, just hold on there. But okay, let's start there first. What is genetic testing? Okay, now let's start there first. Before we go into the different tests, let's start there for our audience. What is genetic testing?
Genetic testing, everybody knows, well, most people know, you don't have to go to university for this, that we're made up of DNA. Right? We've got chromosomes, and those chromosomes hold all the information about who we are, how we're made up, all our traits, etc., etc. And there's genetics overall is a very, very wide topic. Today, you've got all sorts of different disciplines using genetics. And, some people actually get muddled up. Can you come to FutureGen Labs to decide that your baby has brown eyes? No. Can I do a test with you and can you tell me if I'm half Irish and half English? No. There are those disciplines that they do it. Other people are using it in the field of nutrition, and people are using it in all sorts of things. We're very hardcore medical genetics. And in being hardcore, we only deal with reproductive genetics, meaning there is a whole field of cancer genetics. There's a whole field of pharmacogenetics where they're looking at the interaction of drugs with genetics. That's what I'm saying. Genetics as a topic, the sun is only rising. So when we are going to be discussing genetics, we're talking from a very strong medical base regarding your reproduction and your embryos and your children, and how we can deal with genetic disease within that area. Are there all the others? Yes, there are.
Sure.
Not our speciality, and we keep the main thing.
No, I'm glad, and we're glad. I think my audience will be really glad knowing that you are so focused on, that reproductive genetics, and that's really, really important. So, Quinton, over to you. What are all the tests that you offer? What kind of tests can parents, when they work with the IVF labs, what can they find out? And what would they want to know? They might not even realize it themselves right now. All they want to do is fall pregnant, right?
Right.
That's the main aim. I want to fall pregnant, and I want to carry this pregnancy through successfully so I can give birth to a beautiful bouncing baby, right? But there could be challenges along the way. And obviously, you've come from that opportunity to have seen from probably thousands of patients and the different challenges that may be. And sometimes I think parents also don't realize that they have the opportunity to ask for these options, to ask these questions. It might sound like a silly question, but it could be really, really important, and it could be possible and could change their outcomes, right? So where should we begin?
Sure. I think you touched on a lot of things there. But let's start with, so I think you made a very important comment in terms of they have choice, right? So the big test that we offer within the IVF space is called PGTA.
Right.
And again, if you are somebody that's 36 or older, you've had recurrent miscarriages, you've had struggled to fall pregnant, or even repeated implantation failures. So this is when you've gone for IVF, they've implanted, and there was a miscarriage or it didn't take.
Mm-hmm.
Then this would be your first port of call in terms of testing. And I like the fact that you said choice, because a lot of the doctors do know this is available, but they've got their own hesitations in using it. We are obviously big advocates for the use of the test. You asked the question about genetics. If I were to put it simply, genetics is heritable to a large extent, and genetics is you. So the traditional model is, you're half of your mom and half of your dad. As you get older, you realize that might relate to traits as well, in terms of personality. But it also relates to things like, how big is your nose, or, this funny little earlobe, or mom's little toenail that's, slightly off. All these things can be linked back to genetics. And with PGTA, we really see the combination of the two kind of in a zoomed out view. Mm-hmm. When you talk about heritability, you talk about chromosomes, you talk about these units that are transferred from one generation to the next. And with PGTA, we look at the combination of basically what has mom got, what has dad got, and what does this combination bring. So we talk about a karyotype. So this is, you've got 22 chromosomes, pairs, so one from each parent.
Right.
And then you've got your gender chromosomes, your X and your Y. And with PGTA, we look at these chromosomes to see if there's large structural issues, because these can lead to birth defects such as Down syndrome or miscarriages.
Okay.
So PGTA is useful in screening these embryos so that if you've got a bucket to select from, we're not going to pick apple 1, 2, and 3. We like apple number 4. So let's pick apple number 4 to maximize your IVF outcome.
So does the test happen on the embryo before it is fertilized? Or is it after?
So you've got the egg and you've got the sperm.
Right.
In order to be an embryo, there has to be fertilization. So once fertilization occurs, then you have an embryo.
Right. See. Okay. Important
This
point.
structure develops over a few days in, let's say in vitro, but let's say outside of the body to keep it simpler. And it can grow for about 5 to 7 days. And before they can implant it, once it's reached 8, it's grown too big, it can't be implanted back into the woman.
Okay.
After these 5 days, they do a microscope assessment. These very skilled embryologists, they are amazing what they do. They then assess the quality of this, and based on certain structures, based on the way, certain things develop, you have 2 things that basically form the one. It's called the inner cell mass. So that will become your baby, your fetus. The other side of the embryo, that becomes your support structure, that becomes the placenta. And what they do is they take a few cells at this stage from the placenta and send it to us, and we test those to see what the picture is going to be like of the potential fetus. And again, with this tool, you can select, ones that are not so good from the better ones. And again, the important thing with this PGTA test is that it shortens the time to pregnancy. Especially in these patients that are struggling, especially these patients that, they do not have many more eggs in the basket, so to speak.
Right.
So it shortens their journey and improves their chances of having a successful pregnancy.
So it shortens the journey because you're doing the test and you're not just going ahead and inserting
blindly.
Yes.
Which they did like 30 years ago. They used to fertilize like 6 eggs, kind of like roll the dice, put them all in, hope some of them take, and then hope that you land up with healthy kids. Where today, going back to what Quinton says, there's choice. We've got the ability today, which is quite mind-boggling. I'm in the business, I'm listening to Quinton, and I'm mind-boggled that today we can just take a couple of cells that will form the placenta, and that will tell you if there's structural damage to the genetic makeup of the child, and you can have a choice and say, this one, there is a deletion or there's an insertion of genetic material. It could lead to a child having Down syndrome. Don't use it. Here, this, by all probabilities, looks like a healthy cell, like the chances of having a healthy pregnancy and a live child is much greater. That's why all the IVF labs have embraced it to a large extent. Those that are still hesitant are still like a little bit behind, haven't seen the sun rising, on the information that we can get.
Yeah, I completely agree. Amazing. So then that's the one, right? So let's move on. And now we have the POC screen test.
Right. So, like I said, the miscarriage do occur and they are devastating.
What does POC stand for?
It's medical jargon.
Okay.
It refers to products of conception. So basically what forms during the process of making a baby.
Okay.
Right.
Got you. Right.
So almost half of all miscarriages are caused by these structural changes in these chromosomes. And in providing the screening tool, we can see if a miscarriage was due to a genetic abnormality, specifically structural.
Right.
Where this is useful is, I was talking earlier about the older patients, but this is also useful for younger patients. You do get 20-year-olds that are also struggling with fertility, and all things being equal, their treatment being sorted, their fibroids have been removed, whatever obstructions or, low sperm count or whatever they've overcome, they are still susceptible, maybe not as much as the older generation, but they are still susceptible. So when we do pick up a positive result on a POC, meaning that there is a genetic imbalance, then the surgeon can provide them, or the IVF specialist can provide them with options to say, okay, we have found that there is this in the family. In some cases, it can lead to show that there is an imbalance in the parents, which they are perfectly normal, but during the splitting of the two, it becomes unbalanced. So you can pick up something in the parents that they need to look out for, and then this provides them with the option of doing PGT in future.
Okay.
To say
yes,
you are now susceptible, so we know kind of this is an issue, so let's see what options you have in terms of genetics to minimize the risk of this happening again.
Okay.
So
Amazing.
that's POC.
POC. And then
Some people, by the way, call it POC. A POC screen.
A POC screen. Yeah, so patients here, or our listeners know, and somebody's recommended a POC screen.
You know that is the POC. The
Well, it's POC. Okay. Lots of terminologies. So what about the PGT-M, right?
Yes.
And carrier screening, right?
Yes. So let's start. They are kind of linked. So let's start with the PGT-M, or historically it was known as pre-implantation genetic diagnosis.
Okay.
So, or diagnostic testing. So what many people have, for example, is breast cancer, and they have a family history of breast cancer. They've watched their mother, their aunt, their sister all be affected by this cancer, and they're at root. This is highly transmissible to the next generation. They've seen them suffer through it, and they do not wish this upon their children. So with the technology that we have now, not only can we look at a zoomed out view to see largely if there's something wrong, but if we know that there is a history of breast cancer, and if there is a mutation or an abnormality that they've identified, we can now also screen the embryos for this. So that again, the IVF specialist can go, well, you don't want breast cancer to be transferred, so we pick the best possible embryos to minimize the risk of this happening in the next generation.
You talk about example. We just had a young mother. She didn't necessarily have a problem with pregnancy. She could fall pregnant easily. She didn't have a fertility problem.
Right.
But she did have a problem that her mother, her sister, her grandmother, everybody was developing breast cancer. They were very strong on the BRCA genes, and she didn't want to pass that on. So she went to the IVF lab, not because of fertility, but to help her manage this process, that we are able to go and look at the embryos before implantation. Obviously, we do a workup of the family so we can identify the mutations and the genes that we have to look at. And then through PGT-M, we were able to say, these embryos are carriers of it, these aren't. And then she's got the choice, coming back again to choice, to say, I'm going to stop this disease from passing on. I mean, we're using breast cancer as something, but it's cystic fibrosis with Tay-Sachs, with thalassemia, with all these things that, families talk about, we happen to be carriers of. Before, you used to play roulette, and just hope that you've got a 25% chance not to have it and maybe just have a carrier, but families have been affected by it. Today, that's not the case anymore. You have the choice not to allow that disease to carry on down the generations, which is quite phenomenal. It's eradication. It's, we eradicated polio. You can eradicate the transmission of these type of genetic diseases down families today.
And very important, it's about selection and about options. We're not.
Yes.
This is not eugenics. We're not playing God. Yeah. We're just screening for what there is.
Yes.
And they're making a choice based on what there is. We are not playing with the genes or giving them these traits.
We're not cutting them and splicing them and making another human being.
No.
We're just reading what we have. But in that, there's a tremendous amount of choice. And that leads to carrier screening, which is our newest test, which we're actually going to be presenting to South Africa.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's about to be launched.
Well, before before you go to carrier screening, but I really think that PGTM is fascinating, that, because a lot of parents and a lot of families have hereditary conditions that they carry down, and we know that, and it's quite a different lifestyle and what you have to go through. Some of them more severe than others, and it stops people actually from wanting a family because you don't want to let that continue, but you so desperately want a family. There's that, and knowing that you can
do it today.
Do this, and you can have that family and make that choice and look at those embryos and see what's working is truly, truly amazing. That is, wow, such an awesome gift to have, to be able to do that.
I mean, there's a thing that they say, like, for example, in places like Nigeria, part of the dating apps is, what is your sickle cell status? Are you a carrier or not? Because the prevalence of the condition is that high. And obviously, with two carriers coming together. And a lot of these things, are because of genetic bottlenecks. And we in South Africa are well known for our genetic bottlenecks because we're such a mixed group of people,
It's true.
In Indian families, beta thalassemia is quite high, Afrikaner families, cholesterol, Stargardt's disease. There's lots of things that, because it comes from a small population that populated the community, and that then the child carry deleterious effects carrying on, it becomes significantly higher. Yeah. And with this tool, we have the ability to reduce the risk of this carrying on.
Wow, amazing. Talking about carrying on, now the carrier screening.
Right. So all the products that we spoke about before was really focused in conjunction with the IVF clinics and people that are working closely together or need fertility treatments.
Yes.
So carrier screening is more a direct-to-consumer type of test. Mm-hmm. That being said, we are very conscious to test responsibly. So what I mean by that, before I touch on carrier screening, is you do have a lot of these commercial companies, and I'm obviously not going to name names, but they will tell you, we will tell you your kid is going to become a cricket player based on genetics, right? They sell this information. They provide you with this lovely report with this bunch of jargon on it. And now your kid is going to become the best. He's going to become the new Graham Smith or the new, Hashim Amla, whatever the case may be. And the patients and the doctors often sit with these reports and they try and decipher what's fact from fiction. And we are very passionate that even if somebody comes with a self-referral, as part of that process, they get a little bit of history about what the test does, why is it important, what are the possible outcomes, and what to expect. So before they sign up, they kind of get a expectation of what they're getting into.
Yes.
But most importantly, once they get the results, it will be counseled to them. So either by a digital video that will explain what the scenario is,
right,
or in the more severe cases, there will be a physical genetic counselor that will explain these results to them, and they will have an actual report. So not just have a, you have breast cancer, good luck type of thing, or, you can't eat beetroot because you'll blow up, I'm saying this kind of tongue in cheek.
No, of course.
But this is the information that people struggle with and people are dealt with. These companies sell them these tests, but they do not provide the support or the context to put this to use, right?
Yeah, agreed.
So that's what we mean by test responsibly. So to touch on carrier screening, we talked a bit about heritability. We talked about different diseases that gets carried on from one generation to the next. And again, we're not sitting in an environment traditionally where you're still going to have 5 kids like the boomers did, for example. The financial situation, again, I'm just using that as an example. It's one of the pressures. People are having 1 kid or 2 kids or no kids. And you want that to be the best possible outcome. And with carrier screening, we can test the parents for common severe conditions and see, is mom a carrier of A? And is dad a carrier of A? Because then there's a risk of them having condition A.
Okay.
But if mom is a condition of A and dad is a condition of C, it's fine. The children will have a reduced risk of having those conditions. And again, like I'll use a common example in the Jewish community. They always talk about Tay-Sachs disease. And through genetic screening, they have practically bred out the condition through years and years. So this empowers patients, again, to make sure that you have, which reduces the risk of having just a healthy baby.
Yeah.
And these conditions that we test for are the most common and the most severe. So we're not talking about, again, the silly little toenail or, you're a bit of lactose intolerance.
Yeah.
We're talking about really the severe stuff.
So tell me, so the carrier test will be done then before you conceive,
Yes,
right?
I want to say at a family planning stage. So when you're ready to start a family, then you start to think of carrier screening.
Yes.
So to contextualize it, all our tests for the IVF labs are reactive tests, meaning you're in a situation, you're struggling in whatever way, and now we are reacting to your reproductive journey and we're helping you.
So that's the PGT.
PGTA, the POC, and the PGTM.
Right.
Carrier screening is proactive. So, and it's something that is in your hands. You don't need a doctor to go and tell you to do it. You're getting engaged, you're newly married, you're thinking about falling pregnant. Just do the test. It's a once in a lifetime test. You don't need to get tested and tested and tested and tested again. All you're doing is really getting kind of like, if I could put it in layman's term, like an encyclopedia of your genetic makeup, and just making sure that there aren't any like crossroads that you're going to hit that could potentially really affect your reproductive journey and your children and your generations moving forward. Again, going back 30 years, people did know, okay, we both carried cystic fibrosis or Tay-Sachs or thalassemia or SMA or anything, and we just used to roll the dice and just, pray. And I don't think it's bad to pray, but you can pray and also put an effort today and get, be guided much, much more. And it does. It eradicates. It will eventually, once it's established, as something that is common, in 20, 30 years' time, you will see a lower incidence, in places where they are practicing carrier screening. And in fact, overseas, there's many places that have mandated. For example, Israel, one of the places that I did visit when I was setting up my laboratory, they made it a government-mandated practice, meaning the government funded it, that every single child in matric go for carrier screening. Why? Obviously, matric, after they leave, they're on their ways. They might go overseas. They might do whatever have you. But it was in their best interest and affordable to go and let them do the carrier screening, because they know that in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, when these matriculants are now on their reproductive journey, it's going to cost the government a lot more running cycles of IVF when knowledge is power. Absolutely. Like if I know that you've got it, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. We all carry genetic disease. I mean, I did a profile and I'm already a grandmother, but it gave me an insight to what I was carrying and what I passed on to my generation. So
tell me, so if both partners are carrying the same condition, what are the next steps? Does that mean we can't have babies anymore?
No, so that exactly is the beauty of the tool. And very important, like Adele said, we're all carriers of something. For example, I am a carrier of spinal muscular atrophy, but it is a recessive condition, meaning that my wife has to be also a carrier in order for the disease to progress.
Okay.
Right? So
to the next generation.
The next generation.
Yes.
And in this particular case, it's a severe condition. Life expectancy is about 4 years or less. The baby starts to develop normally, and then the muscles just progressively get weaker and weaker. So that's what I'm saying. We're really looking at the hard hitters to minimize the risk of transferring it on. I said that PGD and carrier screening are closely linked, and that's exactly why. So, some people will go the option, do carrier screening, and if they're not a match, they will go their separate ways. But in some cases, love conquers all. At least I'd like to think so, or you've already been married and now you're going for carrier screening. So now you sit in that boat like, what do we do with this?
Yes.
And now again, the PGD is an option.
PGT.
Because now you've got the choice to say like, what, we know we have a risk of having a child that is affected, but with the technology today, we can reduce that risk to make sure that we have a healthy child.
So I'll give you an example. We just finished up a case about a year and a half ago of a family where they were carrying an inherited disease down generations, right? And it affects the woman particularly. She has egg insufficiency, goes into menopause much earlier, and if she had a boy, it would be really, really bad, etc., etc. And it was carried down. And, she went to the IVF labs and went through this entire process. Obviously found out, I think, from carrier screening. It was before our time, the carrier screening. They went to the IVF lab, did everything, did the PGTA, but did the PGTM. She, thank God, has a healthy boy. And that's the end of this inheritable disease, just wreaking havoc on a family, which is extraordinary.
Wow. Phenomenal. That is really, really life-changing. I mean, so many people would struggle with something like this, but knowing that there's a solution, that you don't have to have sleepless nights your whole pregnancy through, worried till the end, that you can do this at an affordable cost even as well, even more importantly, is truly, truly phenomenal. So amazing work, guys. Amazing. So next up, let's talk about, we talked about all these tests that you have, but, and a lot of parents, obviously, it's quite overwhelming for them. What would you say to reassure them about these tests, that they're safe, that they, are not going to harm you, your family, your child? What would you say to that?
Look, when it comes to, for example, carrier screening, there's nothing unsafe really about the test. It's a saliva test. There's nothing scary about it.
Really?
Okay? You're just spitting into a little container and we're able to pick up your DNA there. And truthfully, people are far more relaxed than sitting, their saliva away to go check if they're half Irish and half, so there's no harm to you.
Right.
Obviously, there are certain risks. Everything, you take a risk with when you're at the IVF lab, and that's explained, by the primary doctors there, et cetera, et cetera. But on an overall basis, I would go and say, for me, knowledge is power. Like if I've got more knowledge, and we were speaking just before that your passion was that you didn't have enough information as a mother in so many areas. Today that knowledge is there, and it will only create a healthier society, a better society, and allow you to make informed choices. So it's not so, some people are scared because we always are against, don't tell anybody your genetic thing because they won't marry you. We're all carriers of genetic disease. If you do a test on everybody, you're going to see what it is that you carry. That's life.
Yes.
But today, if you know about things, we're so much into control. You want to be a control freak. It's here, but it's not to make you a control freak. It's there for you to maximize your reproductive journey. So don't shy away from it. Embrace it.
Embrace it. Own it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think just to add on that, I mean, Adele briefly mentioned like the stigma of your results, etc. I think, in terms of providing patients with some comfort, for example, dating even has changed over the years. You don't meet, people through conventional means. I met my wife online. Theoretically, we dated, via online interaction. In those days it was Facebook, but yes. And, sorry, the point I'm trying to make about this
that
is things have changed over time.
Yeah.
And fertility usually is such a sensitive issue.
Yeah.
We deal with a lot of patients and a lot of anxiety. I'm sure it is tenfold more on our IVF partners and the doctors there. But there's such a stigma around it and your worth, If you're not able to conceive a child, what kind of woman are you? Oh, you have a low sperm count. What kind of a man are you, They attach worth to that. And I think to provide peace of mind, because like I said, the dating scene has changed. World is different. Women want careers. So they might not be married when they're 25. They might not even have a stable boyfriend or a relationship. If they want to start a family, if that's something they're passionate about, and they happen to be single in their early career, mid-20s, one of the options that they can have is egg freezing.
Of course.
It's relatively cheap in the grand scheme of things. I think it costs you 2,000 Rand a year to keep them frozen.
Yeah.
And they are as good as the day that they are frozen. So when you then choose to start your family, or Mr. Right comes along 10 years down the line, you've got that banked. You don't have to use your eggs at 35. You can use your eggs that you had at 25. Again, it just provides you with more options in this very uncertain times and difficult times. And, you know, and again, with carrier screening as well, you know, when you do get to that family planning stage, you've got options. You've got support now as well. Like there's a test available and there's a counselor on the other end contextualizing things. And again, I'll reiterate the message about you can freeze your eggs.
Tell me something with the carrier screening, though. This is an interesting one, right? So what has there ever been, well, I'm not sure how many you've done so far, but has there been a time where the patients discovered something that they didn't even know they had?
I was actually going to share with you a story we had just maybe a couple of weeks ago. We did a test on a couple that I believe were preparing themselves for their reproductive journey, and the one partner had an impairment, you know, that modern medicine had blamed on all sorts of things.
Well, it wasn't modern medicine. It was like, you know what, you're exaggerating, you're imagining things.
You're doing
kind of familiar indoctrination to say that, you know, it's not so bad.
It's in your head. And when we did the testing, which was obviously they were focusing on tell us our carrier screening, you know, profiles because we want to have kids, we actually found that this one individual was carrying a genetic disease, and that which was an impairment in her life was actually due to her genetics. And she burst out crying. She says, "This is the first time that somebody's saying I'm not crazy, and that it's in your head and it's imagined, and maybe you did the wrong thing and you did this and you did that." And it was actually quite wow. You know, that's
empowering for her, right?
Empowering, because I'm not that crazy, you know, like whatever it is that I'm complaining about, there's a rhyme and there's a reason.
And now I can figure out a course of actions, right?
Correct.
And again, for scenarios like that, we call that incidental findings. So again, that's important that there's a counselor that we're very advocate about to tell them, listen, this is what you can expect. This is what your options are. I'm not a counselor. That's not my area of expertise, but they are, and they can guide you through this process because it does happen.
Yes, you're going to discover things.
Yes, that you did not know.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a paternity test, but...
but you might discover things that you don't know, but it will empower you. And the sooner you discover it, I suppose, it gives you that power to take the right course of action sooner rather than later as well, I suppose.
Also, one of the areas that is going to also open up a lot is those people who are relying on egg or sperm donation. Again, it's not something that is solidified, so to speak, in South Africa as complete law. It definitely is in America. We're a little about 20 years behind what is happening in Europe and America. But now there's screening of the donors. So yes, you have a problem. You know, you need a donor egg. You want to make sure that from a genetic perspective that, you know, you're not...
But column A doesn't match column B.
And so, you know, the conversation around it is happening, and there are egg donation places that are coming to us now and saying, well, we want our donors screened so that when we go to the IVF labs or to whoever and saying, right, you know, we've got egg donations for you, we can say that there's been a screening. And, you know, these severe diseases, the major diseases, again, reiterating what Quinton said, it's not about your earlobe or that you're going to get a crooked toenail or so we're talking about major disease.
And again, it's to provide them with options. We're all carriers of something. So it's not to ostracize the donor.
Yeah.
It's about if the recipient is a carrier of the same condition, you don't want to bring a new condition into the family. So it's just the providing choices to the people.
So, I mean, I think we've probably covered this already. What's next in genetic testing that you think will come our way? I mean, like you're saying, what we're talking about now wasn't even considered probably 20 years ago, right?
10 years ago.
10 years ago even. I was about to say 10, but I thought maybe I'm pushing it.
I was doing it in very small things.
Has been around.
Yeah, but not PGTA to the extent that it is now. What's next for us, I can tell you, is that once we've launched carrier screening, there's a lot of education around it. It's actually about education and talking to people and, putting people's mind at rest. We're going to be looking at the prenatal screening, which again also is
neonatal.
Sorry, it's not prenatal, neonatal. Apology.
Newborn.
The newborns.
Newborn screening.
Right.
Okay.
So they newborns are being screened, and there's many times that they're carrying metabolic disease that you can't pick up. You could have even gone through PGTA and everything, and you have a healthy baby, but there is they're a carrier of a metabolic disease, and early intervention. Prevention is better than cure. There are things today in modern medicine that will help the child live a healthy life.
Instead of going through a process of discovery for the next 5, 10,
sometimes
20.
you get irreparable damage, by the time you actually wake up to the fact that that's what they were carrying. Sometimes it's a little too late, or it's like really hard. You find yourself in a very difficult situation. So our next step will be to bring in neonatal testing, for newborns, just like they go around, with the carts at the nursing homes, and they're giving you your polio injection, and they're checking your hearing now, and they're doing this. They're going to check your kid, and again, knowledge is power. It's nothing to be scared of. It's actually to be embraced.
Absolutely. That is so empowering. That is, it's so exciting, I think, for new moms, new families planning today. Like you're saying, due to the environment has changed. The world has changed in so many ways. And knowing that there are tests like these and laboratories like these that are there, that are accessible and affordable to help the young families will just make us all more comfortable and happier knowing that the families that we're growing are safe.
I want to add one thing, because you said it's very empowering for those that are in their reproductive years. With regards to carrier screening, it's even empowering for me as a grandmother. I did my tests, and then I made my kids, who I'm a grandmother, I made all my kids tests. Now, thank God we haven't got any obvious genetic disease in the family, that appeared in the way that we've been describing now. But it's very empowering, because we've found a disease that, my child has to say to my grandchild, when you get married, we just have to make sure, to do another carrier testing on your prospective spouse and know which direction to take. And that's marvelous. So in terms of carrier screening, while we are focused on those people that are starting their reproductive journey, or thinking about or wanting to know, there's nothing wrong in, the older generations going and testing just to gain an understanding of your family. And,
that is so true. It is so true.
Even in some cases, it provides you obviously some clues as to family history. And that's why, again, counseling is important. They draw up these pedigrees, because then, yes, I've got this condition that's linked to kidney disease in the family. It's like, oh, but auntie, this and this had kidney issues, so it kind of tells you a bit more about yourself and your past and where you came from.
And these days, you see the genealogy is becoming so important. Like, everybody wants to know their family tree and how far it extends and how we connect people and how we connect it across the world, across, cultures. And it's so important. And adding this level to it is also truly helpful to the next generation that will, have the world on their shoulders.
There's an extra point that you're making over there. And that was also that in the past, this type of hereditary genetic disease being passed was very cultural.
Yeah.
So if you're Jewish, check for Tay-Sachs, If you check for and I don't have it, okay, because I don't come from there. And what has happened in the last 5 to 10 years is that the guidelines have changed, because we are no longer, like everybody living in their little village and intermarrying, Indian marrying with Indian, Jewish marrying Jewish, Afrikaans, and Afrikaans is marrying here.
Even back then, there is no pure population.
There isn't, but
there is no this is the perfect example of a human being. People would like it to be that way, But it's not. What they found with doing these expanded screening like we do now, you'll find a Jewish condition in a Memon. You will find, Ashkenazi mutations in a Nigerian patient, things historically that have been labeled that way. And obviously it goes with migration patterns.
Yes, that's true.
Which obviously has changed, but the global population change. We are connected more now than ever. Some would argue more disconnected, but again, in terms of movement,
yes,
it's much easier. So they want to move away from that thing about putting you in this nice little box, because that box shouldn't be there.
Kind of somebody's listening and say, well, I'm Jewish. I've checked out for Tay-Sachs. We don't have it. We can move along. I don't have to worry about all the other diseases.
Yeah.
No.
No.
Because today we are a whirlpool of, we've expanded. Everybody is marrying everybody else. And you never know.
Absolutely.
You never know.
And especially given the history of South Africa, you have found out that these people that arrived on their little boat so many moons ago, they didn't just go for option A, B. They went for chicken. They went for lamb. They went for everything that was.
There's a variety.
And they were just told, this is how it went. But genetics doesn't lie. It tells you this was the history of it.
That's so true.
Just to touch, sorry.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Just to also touch on the future, I think what would be very exciting in the field, it has many applications, but specifically the reproductive field, is they're making progress in, I want to say, reverse engineering cells. So obviously, I'm not going to touch on, it has applications in other medicine fields, like, for example, organ donation. But what they are working on is that you even can take a simple skin cell and you can digress it back to what they call a pluripotent stem cell. And this cell has the potential to become anything in your body. So if you need a kidney, they can tell it to become a kidney. If you need, in the reproductive base, this is exciting, because if a woman is in her 40s, she has no more eggs, guess what? You can take her skin, potentially, and make it an egg. I mean, that's what they're working on. Obviously, there is
work in progress.
There is limitations and ethics and things to consider, but I think it's a very exciting space to look at in medicine and genetics as a whole, because it has massive implications. We're stuck with so many people that need donors. In the reproductive space, like I said, it can solve so many things. It's really something exciting that they are making some developments on.
Yes, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But knowing that the possibility, it is there, is really, really exciting, I think, and will help a lot of people. So if our listeners want to have any of these tests done, or get hold of you, what should they do? What is the steps?
Okay, so we've got to divide it into two.
Yes.
All the tests that we are doing via the IVF labs, they have to go through their primary fertility doctors. They can't come to us and say, please check my embryos, okay?
Okay.
So they have to go through the laboratories, but have the discussion with the doctors, And I'll be so bold as to say, if the doctor is shying away from it, get a second opinion, because it is something that has become widely adopted. And we have the stats to prove it that it does assist in that case. So that's with or PGTA, PGTM, and obviously the POC screening generally is not an IVF. Sometimes it is the IVF lab, but sometimes it's just your gynecologist dealing with that is dealing with you having recurrent miscarriages. Ask them to do that test.
Okay, so even it doesn't need to be via an IVF lab.
It doesn't.
Just
POCs don't. Gynaes will do it at the time where they're assisting.
And POC again is
products of conception. That is where
the miscarriage.
Right.
Carrier screening, however, you don't have to go through a doctor. You don't have to have any letter. It's proactive. Remember, I said those are reactive. This is proactive.
Mm-hmm.
This is you saying, I want the knowledge. I feel empowered. It can give me insight. Maybe you do know that your family is vulnerable or is carrying some disease, or and you want just to have more information before. We're so into pushing moms, make sure you eat healthy, and make sure you exercise and make sure you have the right vitamins. Check your genetics.
Yes. Another tick box at least.
Just another tick box, because that's just the way the world is going.
And it's really possible.
Correct.
That's the thing. Right?
Correct. So In terms of carrier screening, you can go to our website, which is futuregenlabs.co.za. All the tests we've spoken about are there. There's a wealth of information. If you want more information, you're most welcome to call us on the lab line, particularly with carrier screening. Again, speak to your doctors. If not, we're happy to
Direct you.
Yeah, to direct you, to explain a little bit more to you. It's the information is there. You can Google it and you'll see,
Of course.
so much about it.
Absolutely. Yes.
And just a final thought on that.
Yes.
So there is a reason we have the name that we do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not the future of genetics, but it's also future generations. So hence we are future gen.
Yes. We are there to ensure these future generations survive, exist, and are well and healthy as well.
And it's given us so much joy. We've had, thank God, in the last 5 years, we've actually had joy of seeing people having healthy children. It's the best feeling in the world.
I'm sure. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. It really was truly inspiring and educating and informing. I've learned so much. I'm definitely on the tick box there. I'm so curious about the carrier testing. I think it's really empowering. I really do. It's the worst thing, just waiting and thinking and I don't know. I always want to know, and feel empowered so that we can take action. And I think you're offering all the services that will do just that. So thank you so much. I'm sure our listeners are truly, truly inspired, and I hope that they get in touch with you, whatever their condition or their situation is at that moment, at this moment. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for the opportunity.
A big thank you to Adele and Quinton for joining us today and making such a complex topic so approachable. The work you're doing at FutureGen Labs is truly inspiring and helping families take big steps towards growing their families. For our listeners, if you're curious about genetic testing or wondering how it could fit into your journey, just visit FutureGen Labs website or speak with your doctor. And thank you for tuning in to Lights, Camera, Baby. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. Please subscribe. It really helps us to bring you more content, better content that will empower you on your parenting journey. So, also leave us a review. Tell us what you'd like to hear more about. And don't forget to share this episode with someone who might find it really, really helpful. Until next time, stay curious and take care of yourself and your little ones. I'm Prajini Patha on Lights, Camera, Baby.